Hello, everyone. I know it's been a little bit since my last video, but I'm really excited to share with you this video today that is an overview of Claude Code. So in my last 3 videos, we've talked about hooking up tools like Snowflake, Jira, Databricks with Claude Code to unlock the power of generative AI. But after talking with my team and different individuals who I work with within this space, I want to take a step back and really cover more deeply how to utilize Claude Code and how I have built it to fit my team's data workflow, and how you can utilize these templates and this documentation I'm giving you today in this video so you can leverage these same workflows I've done to success within your team and realize the same productivity gains, and hopefully make tools like Claude Code and working in your terminal, working with repositories, a little bit more approachable if that's something that you've never done before. Or if it's something that you have done before, hopefully this allows you to think a little bit differently for how you can adapt generative AI tools like Claude Code to fit within this environment. Okay, so with our stated intention now to take a step back and learn about Claude Code to make this approachable for everything, what is it that we're actually going to be learning today? The first thing we're going to be covering is the basics, the foundation of Claude Code. So setting it up, installing it, learning how to launch it within a repository, using a Claude.md file, some different modes, compaction, and configuration. All foundational stuff. Now, once you learn, you can be off and running with Claude Code. And this leads us to the second part, which is refining that usage and improving your usage of Claude Code and customizing it so you can adapt it to your workflows, your team, with commands, agents, and best practices and more that I've learned from my time working with it. At the end of this video, what is the value you're going to be walking away with? Well, one, I want it to be approachable for you and your team. Claude Code is a tool that you launch in your terminal. Although they just released a new version that's available in the desktop app, we're going to be focusing on the terminal here, but that's the best way I found to working with Claude Code, and I want it to be approachable and easy for your team and you to understand how to use it. And then secondly, I want Claude Code to unlock a fast, high quality, consistent workflow for you and your team so you can understand how to set that up. Thirdly, you have the skills needed to customize your Claude Code so that once you get it running, then you can really take it to the next level to fit you and your team's workflow. And then lastly, I'm providing so much documentation for you guys. I've worked very hard on this to set up the templates and the information in a succinct and comprehensive way that is able to be referenced by you all so you can take what I've built and adapt it to your teams, your workflow, so that you can get off and running even quicker. With that, let's hop into learning a little bit more about Claude Code. Everything we will be covering today is based upon this guide I have provided for you here that I've linked below in the description within this public repository I've built. And all of the research I've done is based off of Claude Code official documentation like this for installing Claude Code. And then additionally from my own experience of working with Claude Code on a day-to-day basis in a data capacity. And just in case you aren't familiar with Claude Code or this is your first exposure to it, what is it? Well, really, it is Claude in your terminal. It is a command line interface tool where you can say Claude, and then that brings in Claude, and then you can work alongside that, and Claude has access to all your folders, files, different tools you set up in your terminal, like Jira, Databricks, or Snowflake, as we've covered in our other videos. And it can do a lot of things on your behalf, like writing SQL, accessing your database, adhering to specific workflows and patterns once you've set it up with the knowledge to do that. And it is really great for data work, as I say in the beginning, because it offers all these benefits listed here for your data team. So with that, let's get into our first step of actually installing Claude Code. To install Claude Code, all you need to do is have a Claude account, and you need at least a pro version, which is $20 a month. And then you can follow the super easy instructions. I'm using Homebrew as that is what I have installed for my Mac, but there are specific instructions for each sort of computer that you may have or operating system. And if I go over to this screen, I have my terminal open. And really, you can open your terminal in any capacity. Below this, I have my IDE with a terminal open right here that I could also run this command in. It doesn't necessarily matter. But if you just open your terminal and then do the command that it asked you to in that web page, then we'll see here it will update very shortly with a Claude Code installation. It took about a minute, but now Claude is installed, and to launch it from within my terminal, all I need to do is type in the Claude command, enter, and then now we should get, hey, Claude Code, which is great. For those of you who this is your first time setting it up, you might have to follow some more system prompts here that will require you to verify your user, but Claude Code will walk you through that step by step. All right, now that we have Claude Code installed on our computer, the best area to launch it is not inside your home terminal, because this is essentially your base directory for everything and not a great area to have structure and organization, because Claude Code is going to output a lot of files, especially once you get it working within your data team's workflow. And you really should launch it inside a repository so you can customize the knowledge files that it needs in order to be successful and understand the tools that it has access to. So we are going to exit out of terminal, terminate that, and then open up Claude inside of this repository I have here, which Data AI Tickets Templates, that again is linked below in the description. And all I need to do to open Claude here is click Claude. And then here we'll see that Claude is now open, and I can say, hi, where are we? And then Claude will answer that we're inside of the repository if it interprets this request correctly, which it does. And this leads me to the most important thing I want you guys to remember out of this session today, is that you can actually utilize Claude Code to help you utilize Claude Code. It gets very meta here, but I know I've asked Claude to explain certain things to me, asked it how I can better work with it, if it can create agents, commands, which we'll be covering very shortly, based upon that work that we've done, if it can create context that will help it in the future. Ultimately, asked it for suggestions for how I can better utilize it, for any troubleshooting I might have when installing and learning how to utilize a tool. That has been super helpful for me when getting the most out of this for my use case. So when in doubt, ask Claude Code how to use Claude Code. So moving forward, I want to talk about how to set up your repository for success here. And we're going to switch over to the web interface, as I think it looks a little bit nicer here. But I covered this in the Jira and Claude Code video that I had, but just to lay it out a little bit more fully, this is how I've set up my folder structure within the repository, where you have your overall .claude folder, which this will be very important as we go through this video, as this is where you store commands, agents, as well as settings for what you allow Claude to do, what you deny it, what you ask it to ask your permission to complete. And then the overall Claude.md file, which are the instructions, the context that give Claude its knowledge on how to go through the workflow. And then really here is your projects. And so within the Jira setup that I had, we actually called this projects folder tickets, and then had a username. And then underneath that, you have your project name, which could be an individual ticket like we showed in the last Jira video that I made with Con 4, Con 5, Con 6. I'll reference that Jira video below in the description, as I think this covers it. But I have a standardized setup for these data analysis projects where there's queries, QC queries, notebooks, if you're doing Databricks notebooks as well, like I showed in one of my previous videos. And then ultimately a final deliverable section where at the end of the day, a lot of us data analysis professionals are providing a analysis to our stakeholders for what they want and what they need. And it's really helpful to have Claude write that out into a final folder. Now, this is not the only way you can set this up. For example, I know I have a repository with my team where we cover Databricks jobs. And we have Databricks notebooks that are running on standardized schedules, as well as JSON configurations for those Databricks jobs. So we have that all within a repository. That's a little bit more of a data engineering flow dynamic. But the idea is here that you set it up with how your team works. And this is a very common setup given that many data teams I know are working on a ticket by ticket basis. And then additionally, you have your documentation area where you can store data catalogs, other quality standards, maybe other helpful documentation that you can have Claude reference when it needs it for specific analyses or projects that you are taking on. So while I found this repository structure really helpful and successful for my team, ultimately this is going to come down to you, to how you want to set it up. However, the thing that every single repository is going to need in order for Claude Code to be successful is this CLAUDE.md files. So you might have heard of the term context engineering before. What the Claude Markdown files, CLAUDE.md files, are bits of context that allow Claude Code to follow workflow processes, have the knowledge that it has access to tools, and really have the built-in context for you to initiate a conversation with Claude Code inside of a repo and have it be instantaneously successful with working within a particular workflow with specific tools and having the knowledge and access to the knowledge that needs in order to run the SQL queries, access the Jira project, go to Databricks, whatever other systems you have access to, and have it work with those systems successfully. There are really three different types of Claude Markdown files. There's a user home Claude Markdown file, which is something that are personal instructions that will apply to every Claude Code session that you start, and that is in your base directory. And then there are also the repository root CLAUDE.md files, which is for specific repositories. So think at this data AI tickets template level for every single thing that I do within this repository, I want Claude Code to have that knowledge. That is things like access to specific tools, workflows I want it to follow, whatever it may be. And then there's project ticket level CLAUDE.md files. So say I did work on all these different tickets over here. If I look at Con 5, for example, you can see I have a CLAUDE.md. So if I'm doing another ticket that is similar to that one or retaking on work for that specific ticket, then I can have Claude automatically ingest that context when I say, hey, refamiliarize yourself with this. So let's bring this home with some actual examples. To go to the base directory of the repository, you can see I have my Claude.md in here, and I have some critical things I would say I would recommend for everyone to have in their Claude Markdown files. And again, this is all available to you in the links below in the description. Is first, I give it an overview of what I am providing in this document, and then I'm defining its role. So senior data engineer, business intelligence engineer, along with its core development philosophy to keep it simple, stupid, and you aren't going to need it. I actually got this development philosophy from another YouTuber named Cole Medin. Highly recommend him. A little more software engineering oriented, but he gives a lot of good tips on what is coming up in AI. And then following this, we have our critical operating rules where I describe permission hierarchy, explicitly what I need to give it permission to do, and anything that requires my explicit permission, and generally how I want to operate with quality control over everything, documenting all assumptions, updating the files, not sprawling. Claude Code does have a tendency to create a lot of files, so I highly recommend keeping it simple for these analyses. And then organizing things for my review, making it easy for a human to review this, because that is a key part to making AI scalable and high quality, is adding that level of transparency, and the assumptions, analysis, priority order. And additionally, I provided more information on prerequisites, the agents I have available within this repository, data architecture, CLI tools, I would say, is another very important one, data business context, ticket research. There's information here specifically on how I want the workflow to operate as well. So it comes in with a very specific structure for how I want the tickets to be completed within here. So every time I start a new analysis, it follows this singular structure. There's lots of great content in here that I highly recommend adapting, copying, using for your specific use case. I also have some areas in here where you can insert some more context for your own workflows. But what this is designed to do is designed to give you a base for how you can start instructing your Claude.md files. And there's a bunch of different tools I've provided to it that I've utilized. And so that way, every time it starts up, hey, it knows I have access to Snowflake. It knows it has access to Databricks, Jira, etc., and so on. And so there's a lot of really helpful content in here that I never have to feed Claude when I log in. Basically, everything when I open Claude inside a session in this repository for Claude Code, it automatically knows this. And so this is really critical context that is going to set you up for success and allow you to really hit some repeatable workflows too. So again, I'll link this in the comments. And to go for something that's a little bit more specific to work itself, for analyses, I have Claude leave individual Claude.md files inside the appropriate folders. That way, in this Con5 example, which is again just a mock ticket where I gave Claude Code a Jira ticket and had it work on it using the Snowflake CLI. It shows how it did that, does the counts, database structure. And so that way, if I ever come into another ticket like this or have to revisit the ticket, then I say, hey, Claude Code, get familiar with Con5, then it will automatically ingest it too. Switching over here, the last Claude Markdown file I want to show you all here is the one that's actually in your root folder. So if I go to my home directory here and then go to .claude, I can create a Claude Markdown file here, and this will apply across all of my suggestions. And I have a very short file that says, hey, this is communication style, working preferences, suggestions welcome, and then follow the best practices. I just wanted to show you all that this file is available to you as an option in case you have something that is specific to you that you want to make sure is applied across all of your sessions as opposed to individual repositories. All right, so having covered Claude Markdown files, we're now going to cover Claude Code modes. And I promise we'll cover this and then get into some demos for actually showing you all how this fits into practice. But before getting there, it's important to understand how you can break down these different modes of Claude Code. So there's really 3 task-oriented modes. There's standard mode, auto accept edits, and bypass permissions. And basically these are kind of tiered permissioning for how they handle tasks. Standard mode explicitly asks you permission to do a lot of different things based upon the permission settings that you have within your repository. And then there's auto accept edits, which is basically a level of looser permissions above that that allows Claude Code to edit files without prompting for your explicit permission. And then there's bypass permissions, which basically skips any sort of asking you for permission unless you've explicitly marked that in your operating rules, in which Claude Code will explicitly stop and ask for your permissions before moving forward. So it'll like pause the session in that moment in time. And those are the three different task levels of it. And then there's plan mode here, which I utilize a lot, which is very similar to standard mode actually. But instead of having a task and completing a task being the end output that it's oriented towards, it's actually oriented towards producing a plan for you that you can say, hey, yes, this looks great. Now run in auto accept edits mode or run with bypass permissions set. And lastly, this is not a setting I often adjust, but in case you're credit conscious or token conscious, I should say, there's extended thinking where you can say think hard and have Claude really go through a reasoning process, or you can tab and have extended thinking off if you're going through more straightforward tasks. This is more if you're worried about how many tokens you're using. Obviously, thinking harder will utilize more computing power and will require more tokens. And the last thing to note here is that there's this session management with -- resume when you're initiating Claude Code in the terminal. And basically that allows you to pick a previous session that you had started with Claude Code and resume it from wherever the point was if you were working on that session. So for example, say I am done with work at the day, it's 5 p.m., I exit out of my terminal, but I hadn't necessarily finished all the tasks that I wanted to finish with Claude Code in that session. Then I can log in and say Claude, and say I want to bypass permissions, so say Claude, dangerously skip permissions, -- resume, and then it will present me with a menu of previous conversations I have with Claude Code inside that repo. Navigating back to my project here inside of the repository on my computer and cursor, you can see I have the settings.json that is inside the .claude folder for the repository. So the .claude folder is where all of the key settings and agents and commands that Claude has available will be stored beyond the Claude Markdown documentation. And within this, you can see I have the permissions that allow for read, different bash commands that ask me explicitly for my permission and that are denied as well, too. So all of this is customizable, and I can say, hey, Claude, move the insert commands to ask, and actually I would prefer to do that for all of the Snow comments. So I'm going to click Claude, dangerously skip permissions, and then resume. This again is using that resume mode, and we're enabling dangerously skip permissions here for Claude. And then I'll be presented with the menu of different options, and I'm going to click this, and I'm going to say, hey, Claude, move the settings, move these settings from deny to ask in the settings.json file. And then I'll do this. And now if I don't want to have this skip all of the permissions, and let me drag this up a little bit, then I can cycle through the modes. So I can do Shift Tab. And so this is now standard mode. This is accepting edits. This is plan mode. And I will do standard mode first to see it actually ask me permissions for performing this action. So here is what the permissions look like, and I can say 1, 2, 3, and then allowing all edits allows it to make any other further change to settings.json. So if I click 2, then it shouldn't ask me any more times that it edits settings.json once we've completed that. And now we can see, hey, all of my snow have moved from deny to ask, which is where I want them to be. And as I said earlier, using Claude Code to help you adjust these permissions is really, really helpful when you want to run Claude in standard mode with a little bit more protection and just say, hey, I want to enable all select, all XYZ sort of queries, right, using this tool. And that way it won't have to ask your permission when taking specific actions if you want to have it in that little bit more of a controlled manner. Okay, so we adjusted our permissions, and now we're going to bring together the Claude Markdown file context that we fed into our repository, working in the repository with our workflows, and then also using the different modes together. So I have this mock ticket con 7 that is very similar to con 5, which I took on in my Jira and Claude Code video that I have earlier on in my channel. And what we're going to do is we're going to navigate back to my terminal here inside of Cursor with the editor available. And I am going to first, before typing my prompt for taking on that ticket, put in \clear. So \ brings up all the different commands that Claude Code has available to us. We can kind of scroll through it here using the down arrow on our computer keyboard. And then with clear, given that the context that we have from up above has nothing to do with what we're going to do moving forward, I like to do clear. And then I am going to copy and paste my prompt here. And to first start off, I'm going to start in plan mode. So again, just using the Shift tab here to cycle. And if I enter this, what it's going to start doing is not actually completing the task, but planning how it is going to complete the task. And it's going to ask for my permissions in a variety of different ways here. So I'm going to pause the video, let Claude Code do its investigation, and then we'll come back once we have a plan set up. Or it has questions for me, and I'll show you that. Okay, so it came back with a plan pretty immediately since it is a straightforward task. And I actually was presented with the options to accept and then move forward with me approving the edits and the action it took, or approve it and bypass permissions. That was my second option, or reject the plan. And so I rejected the plan because I wanted to show you all this feature of Claude Code where I said, hey, can you ask me some clarified questions about your assumptions? And then I just wanted it to ask me questions. So I said, I want you to do some mathematics about estimating the number of gigabytes I have stored, which is very arbitrary. I do not want to do that. But hopefully you can see if you have a plan, right? And you say, hey, actually, I wanted to include this specific output. Then you could ask that or state that, and then have Claude Code ask you some questions like this. And so I am just going to say, no, just column counts. Let's do all 3. And then exclude the information schema from everything, submit that. And then now Claude Code will come back to me with an altered plan based upon these multiple choice questions that I've answered for it. And it's also very nice because if you saw earlier, it allows you a section where you can write in your answers if the pre-populated answers that Claude Code gives you doesn't necessarily fit what you are hoping to do. And just as I'm saying that, our final plan pops up where what it's going to do, go through a total number of columns, columns by table, tables by schema, key difference from con 5, exclude the information schema. It's going to make this directory. And again, all of this knowledge is coming from this Claude.md file here. And it's using the previous Claude.md file that it automatically ingested from that con 5 ticket. I'm going to run these queries, verify the CSV outputs, deliver me this final output here. All of this looks good to me, so I'm going to have it run in bypass permissions. And then you can see here, the bypass permissions has the red on it, meaning that it's not going to ask me for anything too. Now, this approach might be a little bit more dangerous in software engineering. If you're really worried about breaking something in production, but with the rules that we have outlined inside of our Claude.md file, and just the nature of this analysis, the fact that it's a select and we're taking out CSV files, I'm not too worried about this. And typically, in order for it to get into production, say if you have Databricks jobs that you are concerned about, then you have this process where you merge branches into your main branch and you're not actually editing any of your production code that is stable, which I'll get into the workflow a little bit more particularly later. But I'm going to pause here and we'll come back once this is complete. Okay, so a few minutes later, it is here and it's completed its analysis and everything's looking good. I'm not going to focus so much on the actual results as I really am focusing on the process here with Claude Code. And we can see in the final deliverables, it's delivered all of the 6 files with the CSV as well as the SQL for what it's actually doing. Given it's a straightforward analysis, didn't necessarily need to create its own quality checking SQL files, as it's built that all into this SQL, and it's simple enough SQL that it doesn't necessarily need that, right? And one thing I've noticed is that it didn't write a Claude Markdown file. So I'm going to type in a prompt here that says, write a Claude.md for this folder, and then also make sure that all future ticket workflows write out a specific Claude.md file for that folder, like we did with Con 5, for example. And so like this, I can go and continue iterating with Claude Code until we get it to the place that I want it to be. And we'll pause here and then come back again once it's completed these Claude.md adjustments and creations. Okay, great. Now it has officially created this Claude Markdown file specific to Con 7, and then it updated our root Claude Markdown rules to say, hey, for ticket-specific projects, or really projects, that we should always have a Claude Markdown file. And so now this is a rule. So every single time going forward, it will do this. And so hopefully you really are starting to see how you can build context and improve your workflow. This is an iterative process that I am still working on to this day. So now we're at the last part of kind of our foundational first section here around Claude Code, and that is about compaction. What compaction is say every large language model, Claude, Claude Code, Gemini, OpenAI models, whatever it may be, have a context window, right? And that is essentially a limited amount of space where it has a certain level of knowledge that it can ingest before the context starts to rot. And this is when you see a little bit more hallucinations in model. And so what Claude does to prevent this is it has this auto compaction feature where around 95% capacity, it will do this thing called auto compact, and then essentially it will shrink down the previous large conversation into a much smaller summary that is meant to represent what previously happened. And so this happens in a lot of back and forth. If you've ever had a very long conversation with large language model around a specific topic, you'll notice that as you go very deep into it, sometimes the performance worsens, and that's because of these context windows or these compaction issues. What I do to avoid this is typically I clear the workflow before doing it and then have it store documentation about where it is currently at this point in time. For example, just to show you all what this looks like, I have some screenshots here, but I also was messing around in my terminal and just having Claude Code read a bunch of files, and it says, hey, context left to auto compact 1%, and I'll say input into this Claude, and let me copy and paste this specific path, input into this file where you are at currently. And I will have it actually go into the Claude.md file, output where it is currently, and then typically I'll clear the context, start the conversation again by saying, hey, refamiliarize yourself with Con 7. And then I want you to continue work on XYZ territory. And again, the reason I got to this level of context is I just said, hey, I want you to read all files. So it was a reason that was very random and didn't have anything actually to do with the ticket. But we can see here that it wrote out what it was doing into the Claude.md file. And then now it's going about compacting the conversation. So compacting conversation will take a few minutes. If I want to just escape and ignore this, then I can do that. And then use our handy command called clear. And then I will say refamiliarize yourself with Con 7. Do we have anything left to do? And so this way, I'm preserving context while not sacrificing performance too that comes with auto compaction. And so you can try this on your own. You can see the downgrading of performance that happens following auto compaction. This is something that Anthropic is improving day over day too. Maybe is getting better and better, but I really like this for my workflow as I see pretty consistent high quality results when I don't allow it to auto compact. Now that we've covered the foundational basics, let's actually use some of the cool features that Claude Code provides to us to refine our workflow. As we talked about earlier, there are / commands, which are either built-in commands or custom commands that you can build with Claude that you can call when having a conversation with Claude Code that will perform a standard operation. So 2 example built-in commands are the top ones here, which is /MCP, which allows you to look at the model context protocol servers that you have available, like the Jira MCP or the Snowflake MCP that we set up in my previous videos. And then /context, which allows you to see how your context window is organized within your current session of Claude Code. However, the refinement here, I think, yes, comes with using those standard commands, but it really comes with utilizing custom commands that you can build. And all of this can be found in the .claude folder where we previously had those JSON permissions stored for commands that Claude Code is able to run or it needs to ask permission for, etc. too. And so let's go into this commands folder and I'll show you how I utilize these commands to really smooth out this workflow I have of working within this repository. All right, so now we're back inside my local repository here inside of Cursor, and we can see that I have not finished the Con 7 changes and committed that work to my repository. So I'm going to show you how this workflow would work with these custom commands I've built. And you can see all the different custom commands I have here in this top left-hand corner. One quick note, I just ran this context command. It's really cool, gives you a bunch of visuals to understand how your context is being used. So with running the commands, I actually ran this to ask it to give me a diagram for how I would utilize these commands to visualize it and make it super easy for this video. Where if I were to start over this con7 ticket again, I would say, hey, initiate request con7. And then it creates a branch, sets up the folders, plans a task, asks questions. And then we actually do the work, right? We go into plan mode, we approve the plan, and then typically I would bypass the permissions, have it do work. And then I have this command here that says review work, and I give it the path for con7, and then it runs code review, SQL quality, quality checking, reviews the docs, and then if there's issues, we go back through an iterative process where I will prompt it. However, if it's all good, then we'll say save work, yes. It commits the work, creates a pull request, and then if I'm good with that pull request, it merges that work, and then I can have it back it up to my Google Drive, and then I am done. Next ticket ready. Now, if you are not familiar with this Git workflow for branching, having a feature branch, merging back into main, pull request, I highly recommend looking up that language too. But just to briefly cover it, your main branch is your production ready code, right? And so think of this in this ticket taking structure. It's everything you've already completed, right? It's your done work. You don't want to touch it. That is history. And the initiate request, what it does is it pulls the work from the main branch and creates this feature branch for con7 in this case. And then within this isolated environment for con7, and again, I'm not affecting the history of anything that's already been done, I do the work, and then I create a pull request. And what that is doing is it's taking the work from my con7 branch. And if I approve the pull request, then that puts it back into the main branch or merges it back in. And then my con7 branch ceases to exist. It is deleted. And then everything I had previously done now is back into main. So what are commands? You can see here on my screen that it is nothing more than text saved in a Markdown file. And to be specific, it is a prompt saved in a Markdown file. And yes, I use Claude Code to help me build all of the commands I have stored in here. And you can specify arguments for these commands, right? So for specifically this save work command I can type in \save work yes, and then it'll create a pull request, or \save work no, and then it will save the work without creating a pull request. And you can see here, if we look at review work, this actually invokes some specific agents that I will talk about in a second. The initiate analysis, the merge work, all of this is very, very similar, where all I'm doing is, hey, I have this portion of a repetitive workflow in my head that I am going to be consistently asking Claude Code to do. Why don't I store it in this command, save myself some time, and that way, every time I reach this step in my workflow, all I have to do is type \, and then Claude Code will automatically know what it needs to do by looking at these files and these stored prompts within these commands. Okay, so now we're back inside of Cursor again, and I'm going to run my command of save work. And I can tab there to complete it, and I'll click yes. And so now it is going to commit, push all of this to a con7 branch in my repository that is stored within the GitHub website, and create a pull request that I can then review. And then once I've reviewed it, I can run this merge work command. So we'll let it go through its work here, and then we'll come back once it's finished. And interrupting here 1 quick minute, you can see that it said that, hey, I'm not going to store the other changes I made. One really nice thing about Claude Code is you can actually queue up messages. And so I just told it, hey, commit everything. I want to include the changes that I've made in these files. And so all I did was type out that message as it was working, and then it accounted for that and adjusted its work to make sure that everything I wanted was included. And with Claude Code providing me the pull request here in my terminal, I pulled it up, and then I can see all of the files that are changed that are now different from the main branch. So that have either been edited or added, or if I had deleted files, then I would be able to see that here as well. And I can either click merge pull request within this interface, or I can again use my custom command merge work, and it will run and merge work. And then we can see down here, we're currently on this con7 branch. In a second, what it will do is it will switch over to main once it's merged the work, deleted this branch, and completed this workflow. And here we have it. We are back in the main branch. And then if I go into this web interface, I will now see that I have merged a commit into main. I deleted that branch. And if I go back into my code base and I'm within the main branch here, I will go to tickets, and I should see con7 underneath my username. Now we are in the final part of this video, and we are going to talk about agents. So what are agents? Well, they're basically assistants that have specified purposes that Claude Code can launch either automatically or that you can ask it to explicitly launch. And some of this we've already covered, where there's actually the plan agent, and that is something that is built into Claude Code. When we go into plan mode, it marks up a little plan icon within the terminal, and it is ultimately creating a plan for Claude Code to follow. There's the Explore agent to support code-based exploration and look at existing work. And there's a general purpose, which is the one that we're interacting with most of the time. And very similar to the commands folder, if you want to store your own custom agents, you have the agents folder underneath the .claude file. And here we have 4 agents currently stored in this repository: code review, docs review, QC validator, SQL agent. And if I just click into one SQL quality agent, this is the purpose of the agent. So anytime that Claude Code recognizes a situation automatically where it should call the SQL quality agent, it should be able to do that. Or you can say, hey, call the SQL quality agent to review this specific piece of code I wrote, or the SQL script. And then you can also combine commands with agents. So for example, I have this review work command where if I say review work and /review work and then put in con7 afterwards, then it will go review the folder of con7 and then make a judgment based upon the files that are available for whether it should call the QC validator agent, the code review agent, the docs review. And so this command explicitly says, hey, utilize these agents to check this work. So all of this can be stacked and built upon each other to make a better workflow combining commands and agents. To show you agents in action, I've switched back here to my repository, and I'm going to run review work and con7. So that command I just showed you for review work, where it invokes different agents, we'll see that go to work here, and I'm going to pause and pull it up once it has those agents running. Okay, now it is going to work, and we can see that it found some SQL files, some CSV files. So it's running this code review agent, SQL quality agent, docs review agent, and then all of this will ultimately culminate in a review for me to tell me whether or not there are anything I need to change or if there is any work that looks odd from a SQL quality perspective, or if it's all good to go. So we'll let this run for a little bit and come back. Okay, coming back, it has finished the agents, and we can see that you can customize the colors, so they have fun colors there. And it says that basically everything grades out as excellent, which is expected given that we just completed this workflow. This is great for invoking agents, but what if we want to create an agent and create a command? I am going to show you how to do that. The first thing we will type is our handy backsplash and then type in agents. And we will do create new agents. We'll make it specific to this project. You can also have personal agents, just in the same way that you would have personal Claude Markdown files. You can do this as well for commands, but we'll stick it to the project and we will generate with Claude. And what I want it to do is I actually notice that my Con7 wasn't transitioned from my to-do to my done board here. And I am going to say, I want a Jira agent that is going to transition work. So let me pause and type that up. Okay, I finished my description. Basically, I want a Jira agent that uses the Atlassian CLI to transition work from to-do in progress, and then from in progress to deployed. Once I am finished with it, I'm going to change this to done. But then if it is still in to-do, and I say it is done, then just move it to done too. So describing a workflow here, I will click enter, submit, and now it is going to generate my agent from that description. Following the description generation, it hasn't shown me that yet, but it presents me with this option for tool selection. I'm just going to click all tools and then continue, enter, and then we'll go for Sonnet. This probably could be done by Haiku since it's a very, very simple task, but we'll just keep it default with Sonnet. And now I'll pick a fun color. We'll go with green and click enter. Now we have our Jira ticket transitioner agent that is below and available in this option. And if I want to edit it, I can view agent, edit agent, delete it, and so on. But if I wanted to do that within the repository itself, all I would need to do is go to this agent folder, click this, and then I can edit the markdown here, which this makes it look hectic. But if we look at this markdown, we can see that it has some context on what it needs to do. Exiting out of the agent menu and bringing this all together with the commands, I have this prompt here that I say, create a command that invokes my Jira ticket transitioner agent, where I can give it a ticket number as an argument and it will transition it to done. So I'm going to put that in and let Claude now create another command that will go underneath this folder, and then we can test this agent together. Okay, we can see here that it had initially created the done command. I didn't like that as I wanted it to be a little bit more specific. So I said, call it Jira ticket done. And the command is now present there. However, if I try to do backslash, it does not show up here. And what I need to do is exit and then go back to resume, and we'll resume the session. And then now if I type up the backslash Jira ticket done and go con7, now it recognizes that command and will go and proceed with processing this utilizing the agent. We can see the agent is getting spun up. This is my first time testing this all too, so we'll see how it works. And now I will pause, let it figure itself out here, and then we can move forward. Thankfully, the fix was an easy one. I just had an expired API token, so once I renewed that and put it into my Atlassian CLI, it worked perfectly fine. And here we can see the stored command for invoking the Jira ticket transitioner agent. I ran my command here again for con7, and it completed that and moved it to done. And then now we can see that con7 has been completed. And that is it for testing our agent commands and for this whole video. We have covered so much in this video, from the foundations of Claude Code to refining your work with it and using the more advanced features. This is truly how I utilize this tool in my day-to-day work, and I have seen so much productivity gains from using it. I hope that you find the same value as well as your teams find the same value. And I just want to say thank you so much for trusting me with your time, as I know it is valuable, and I'm excited to be here as a learning partner to you. And if you like this content, please throw it a like, give my channel a subscribe, as I really put a lot of time and effort into making these videos, and I just really appreciate you watching them. That said, I'll catch you next time.